Hello, I'm Zaccura and welcome back to my channel and to week 2 of MerMay, or at least the recap of week 2 since, it's over. As I mentioned in last week's video, for week 2 of the MerMay challenge, I decided to go digital, so get ready for that. I also mentioned previously that for each week I'm going for a different theme. Week 1 was Inky Mergals, where I did a bunch of pretty mermaids using ink, and that was very focused on just the mermaid itself. With the exclusion of the very last piece, I didn't even put any backgrounds or environments into them. So the theme I came up with for this week was It's a Big, Big World. I had this idea of showing more of the world a mermaid lives in rather than the mermaid itself, particularly with the focus being on big things. However, I didn't actually come up with the idea for the theme until the second day in the week, so the first piece completely doesn't fit the theme at all. To be honest, it was a busy day, so I didn't get the chance to draw until late at night, so I needed to just rush through it and get something made for the day. So I did this glowing mermaid that's floating on her back. I wish I had a bit more time to refine things a bit more, like cleaning up the lines and such, and honestly, when I first made it, I wasn't too happy with it because I'm a perfectionist, so all I saw was the parts that I couldn't get to and I couldn't refine properly. But now I think, now that I look at it again and I sort of can't see all those little tiny tidbits anymore, I think it turned out alright. Overall, I think the concept is pretty cool with the angle and glowy spots, but y'all can let me know what you think in the comments. And that was day 1, and now we officially go into the pieces that are a part of this week's theme. The piece I did for day 9 was where the spark for the idea of It's a Big, Big World came from, because I really wanted to do this idea for this sort of Finding Nemo moment where the mermaid would be peering up at this big butt. Get it? I started with rendering the background, and if you guys have seen some of my more recent digital art pieces, you may have noticed that I sort of stopped doing line work and instead just render things more as a painting. Well, I wanted to continue that here, and so I directly went in with the colors on top of the loose pencil lines. Usually whenever I paint specific subjects, I tend to naturally fall into this routine of refining the pencil lines, then putting a flat base of color for the subject, and then I go in with the actual colors and then do the shading and lighting. It's sort of a lot of steps and it takes a long time, and I don't really know why I started painting like this. I think it's partly because of certain habits transferring over from how I do drawings that have inked line work in them, and also because of things I tend to see a lot of other digital artists do, particularly with the whole idea of filling in the subject with a blank color, usually like a kind of gray kind of color, because that allows you to have your subject, say it be a person or a ship in this case. If you want it to be separate from the background, you just fill it in with a color, because then it makes using masking layers a lot easier, because you can just clip all of your layers to that layer, and this way when you color you never accidentally go outside the lines and you just keep everything really clean. And I also always used the lasso selection tool to do that, again because I see so many digital artists use the lasso tool to fill in areas. But in this piece, as a way to save time, because I gotta do a painting every day, I skipped and combined a lot of these steps. I didn't refine my sketch all that much. I still put a base color for the subjects, but instead of using the selection lasso tool, I just scribbled it in there with a brush tool, and that worked way faster. I do not have a very steady hand, and using the lasso tool to perfectly outline the area to fill in ends up taking me ages because I have to keep redoing it. But with a brush, I just scribble it in there, and that just seemed to work a lot better for me personally. And after that, I just directly went in with the colors and shading and lighting all pretty much at the same time. It was a very fluid and loose approach of just painting things at whatever time felt right, rather than systematically doing it in steps like I always feel I'm supposed to. And hey, it didn't catch on fire! As a matter of fact, I think it worked out really nice. I ended up not having to use a gazillion layers like usual because I did much of the painting on just a single layer. The end result is more painterly and looser, but I actually like it, so I guess this was yet another step in the evolution of Zacky's style, because for the rest of the week I pretty much did the same thing. For day 10, the large subject was lily pads. I guess they could also just be normal sized lily pads, and the mermaid is just really, really small. I think for many of the pieces this week, that's kind of how it looks. Like the mermaid is just really tiny and the stuff around them is normal sized. But anyway, back to this particular piece. I did have to use some photo reference because I have no idea what lily pads look like from under the water, and they were actually really pretty, to be honest. Like, it's really cool to be able to see the light filtering into the water from above. Like, that's an angle you don't tend to see as a landlubber human being. This piece sort of officially threw off my one painting a day schedule because it took me so long. I wasn't able to finish it all in one day. And I know I should be doing less complicated pieces so they don't take as long, but man, when you're feeling it, you're feeling it. I just really like the idea for the lilies, and I wasn't about to skimp out on it. But for sure, after this one, the rest of the week was pretty much a scramble of, okay, gotta finish yesterday's piece, and then try to squeeze in today's piece, but oh no, now I can't finish this one, and But I do not regret it, because this one is definitely one of my favorites of the week. I just really like the color palette especially. It's so green and yellow and light. And I think the reason I really like it is just because it's so opposite of what I usually work with. If you've seen my work before, you know I love me some purple. Even when I don't plan on using purple, I almost always fall back on it when I'm not sure what to do. For some reason, I just always naturally go over to the purples and reds and blues, and pretty much never use green as a main color, which is a darn tootin' shame, because green is one of my favorite colors, actually. I don't know. Do you guys have any specific colors you tend to gravitate towards and tend to paint a lot of your pictures in? Because I don't think I'm alone on this one. But I'd love to hear what do you guys tend to gravitate towards when you paint? But anyway, ever since I did that landscape impression video, I've really been trying to get out of my purple haze and use other color palettes as well. And this one is a good example of that because there isn't a purple in sight. Well, I may have used a little for some of the shading, but no one needs to know about that. For day 11, I wanted to play with the idea of icebergs, because icebergs are something that is in the water, obviously, and they are very big, obviously. But also because of the fact that even though they can be really huge above the water, they are always even huger under the water, hence the term tip of the iceberg, because the icebergs we see above the water are only a tiny fraction of how big that piece of ice really is. I love the idea of something that's more than meets the eye. Like, it's just really normal or small or cute, but then if you go under the ground or water, it's monstrous and strange, if that makes any sense. And using an iceberg really gave me the freedom to do something like that. So the idea I came up with was that the mermaids that live up in the Arctic make their homes inside of icebergs. Kind of like an igloo, but underwater. I originally was going to have this illustration show the iceberg with these windows, and it would be like a mermaid's home. But then I realized that I couldn't really find a way to draw an actual mermaid in it then. I could put their head poking out of one of the windows, but that just might look like a human in an iceberg underwater. I mean, it ain't a mermaid unless you can show that tail, right? So eventually I thought, wouldn't it be fun if instead of a house, this iceberg was some kind of shop? So after some brainstorming, I figured a mermaid's gotta get their caffeine, so why not make it a coffee shop? But of course, these are mermaids, so instead of coffee, it is a hot kelp shop called the Kelp Cup, where all the hip, young, vegan merpeeps hang out. This one took me a long time, which was kind of surprising because in the end it actually looks kind of loose, like the brush strokes are pretty large and fuzzy. I think part of that is definitely due to the fact that this is a vertical piece. I have a pretty small sized workspace on my laptop. The whole screen is only 14 inches, and then when you add on Clip Studio's program with all the bars on the sides, my actual drawing area is only about like maybe maximum 8 inches wide and 6 inches tall. And while I'm actually one of the few people that kind of like drawing on a small workspace, it does make drawing vertical pieces a little more challenging because unless I zoom in, the entire canvas is only like 6 inches tall, even though it's supposed to be like 17 inches tall. So I'm working on a really zoomed out canvas, and because of that, I tend to skip over a lot of details. I know I can zoom in, but the thing about zooming in is, especially when you're doing an environment piece, you tend to lose a sense of how the whole piece looks together, which is super important. You need to be able to see how all the colors and shadows and shapes look when you look at the entire piece as a whole. So when I'm doing environments, I tend to really like to paint it with the entire canvas in view. And when it's a horizontal piece, it works out alright because my workspace is already a horizontal rectangle. But if I have to stuff a vertical canvas into my already tiny horizontal workspace, then it just becomes super small and far away. So yeah, I definitely think this is a piece that looks its best when it's smaller and zoomed out or farther away. But I did have a lot of fun adding in the detail on the menu. I came up with a few different items on there, all having pun kelp names. If you can read them all, let me know in the comments what's on the menu. iceberg piece took me even longer, which threw off my drawing schedule even more, meaning I was finishing up day 11's piece, the iceberg one, on May 13, 2 days late. So at that point, I really didn't think I'd be able to catch up. But on May 13, the stars must have aligned because I managed to catch up. Almost. I finished the iceberg one and managed to finish day 12's piece, which is the piece you're seeing right now, and finished the sketch for day 13, which day 13, May 13, that's the one I was supposed to get done on that day, but you'll see it next, and wow, this is really confusing, isn't it? TLDR, I was way behind schedule for 2 days, but managed to catch up. There you go, moving on. For day 12, I wanted to have some large objects sitting at the bottom of the ocean, but I wasn't really sure what. I originally thought of a shipwreck, but then I was like, haha, no. So I figured, why not an anchor? It's a relatively simple shape, it's related to aquaticness, so yes, cool. And everything about this piece really went very smoothly. After pounding away every day with these complex environment pieces, when I was doing this one, I finally had this feeling of, yeah, I got this. I actually think I know what I'm doing. Wow. I think every artist gets that feeling after a while of practicing something. And if you're still really new to art and you haven't had the feeling I'm talking about yet, then girl or boy, don't worry. Be happy now. Dun, dun, dun. Don't worry. I guarantee you will get that feeling one day, whether it's with drawing hands or faces or figures or backgrounds or whatever it is that you find hard or intimidating. Keep on pounding away at that practice and you will get that feeling someday, and it won't stop. I'm a big believer that artists are forever students. We're always improving our craft. There's always things that are hard, and how good you get is a simple matter of how much you decide to keep practicing those hard things until they're easy. And this is turning into one heck of a motivational speech, isn't it? Woo! Yeah! Stay awesome, stay inspired always. So, before I trailed off, I mentioned that I finally feel like I got it when drawing this piece, and that definitely contributed to me being able to catch up my slack with these supposedly daily pieces. This anchor piece probably took me about 3 hours, which, believe you me, that's a short time for me for something as complex. I'm a pretty slow drawer. Especially considering I didn't even use reference for this piece, and I thought it came out pretty nice. I was going for something sort of like the equivalent of an underwater desert, so I used a lot of subdued yellow tones, and yeah. Though I must say the mermaid's face looks really strange when you zoom out, like she's super derp. But then when you zoom in, you're like, oh, it's a normal face. I don't know, sometimes things turn out derpy, what can I say? For day 13, I jumped out of the water and made the big subject leaves floating on the water. So this one definitely has to be a tiny mermaid on normal sized leaves. I mean, unless the leaves are ginormous, but that would also make the grass in the background like tree-sized grass, and That idea scares me. So she's a little itty bitty tiny mermaid. And I must admit that I did rush this one just a little bit because I really wanted to catch up my slack. I didn't really get all that creative with the mermaid itself. She's pretty much what I would classify as a stereotypical mermaid because she's pretty much just human upper body and fish lower body, whereas I usually like to make things a bit more strange and different and like make them mermaids seem more creature-like with inhuman skin and features. And the environment was also relatively simple. There's just a few leaves, water, and then the grass in the background, which I must admit probably took up the majority of the time I spent on the background. You know, you gotta get that on fleek grass, y'all. And despite it being a tad rushed, I still think it turned out pretty nice. It has a really chill, calm vibe. And finally, for day 14, I again went with the idea of something large being at the bottom of the ocean, but this time I wanted to do something a bit more mysterious. So I made this space pod looking thing that's in there. You know, maybe it's a time machine, maybe it's an experimental submarine that obviously clearly did not work. Or maybe an alien race on a far distant planet discovered Earth after picking up on strange radio waves, and after decoding it, they realized that the message seemed to resemble some kind of SOS or a beacon for help. And of course they were very confused at the strangeness of the words that seemed to replay over and over again to some kind of uplifting musical beat, while crying out, "Help! I need somebody! Help! Not just anybody! Help! I need someone! Help!" But of course, they simply had to heed to the call. So they created a 40-year mission to launch a probe and make first contact with the human race. They built a ship that could go at speeds not yet known to man and launched it towards Earth. And after many long years, with it finally being in range, the brave aliens aboard the ship boarded their landing pod and fearlessly shot themselves into the atmosphere. And with fiery speed, it then crash-landed into the ocean, sank to the bottom, and with the overwhelming excitement and anxiety that cannot be described to anyone who's never had the honor of making first contact with a new, intelligent species, the aliens inside the pod shoved open the door, the water rushed in, and they quickly found out that they can't swim. The end. Or, I mean, it could just be like a mislaunched NASA pod. I mean, it's really up to you. I really wanted this one to look like it's deep in the ocean, so I made the atmosphere really dark and blue, and I made the mermaid have these glowing spots because creatures start to look like that when you go really deep in the ocean. Clearly, I know a lot about marine life, and really not much more to say about that. After I finished painting, I did have to export and then adjust the contrast and brightness a bit because things ended up coming out a bit too washed out. And because I realized I was drawing it with the brightness on my screen all the way up, I was staring at a light bulb, but because of that I ended up making it super dark. And things like that affect the entire painting, like as a whole, is really hard to fix manually in the painting. So if I end up with something that I feel needs an overall adjustment in brightness and contrast, I usually like to just export the whole thing to a JPEG and then adjust it afterwards, and it works really nicely. And that is a wrap for week 2. I wish I could have had like more camera angles in the video because I always feel like digital art videos can get a little bit boring with it just looking at a computer screen, but I've yet to find a way to film my screen with my camera without it just looking like a bunch of glare and reflections. I don't know if you guys know how to like set up your lighting to do that. I have no idea because I've seen videos where people film their computer screens and it looks good, and I'm like, how do you do that? So if you guys have any tips for me, let me know. But hopefully you guys could find this video interesting regardless. I am really happy with how this week turned out. I think it's kind of funny how, just like last week, I did 6 that fit a theme, but one of them didn't. Last week, the 7th one didn't fit the theme, and this week the first one didn't fit the theme. Will this be a trend? I do not know. We'll just have to wait and see. For now, I think I managed to make some nice paintings for week 2. I definitely improved my painting skills, and that's always a great thing. For week 3, I'm going to be going back to traditional materials again, and this time I'm bringing back out my Copic markers. Num 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 num. Delicious. Which I'm super excited about because I haven't used my Copics in ages, so yay! And as always, do let me know what you thought about this video in the comments, and let me know which of the week's paintings were your favorite and why. I always love to hear from y'all. If you did enjoy this video in any way, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell so you don't miss out on upcoming videos. I make new videos every week. If you'd like to follow me on social media and keep up with my mermaid journey, you can find the links to all of that in the description box. And until next time, stay awesome, stay inspired, always. See ya! Thank you.